So if you're in the market for a 50 style Telecaster, one of these options could be the option for you. I've got a Squier Classic Vibe made in Indonesia. This one's pretty much brand new. I've got a Fender Vintera 50s modified Telecaster. This one's a couple years old. And I've got an American made 52 reissue from 2007. They are very similar in a lot of ways, but also very different. Let's have a look. Here is the Squier Classic Vibe. Close look at it. Fender 50s modified Vintera. Want to note they have two Vintera models. The other one is, I would say, a very similar spec to the American reissue. Here is the American reissue. First, let's talk about fit and finish. Starting with the Classic Vibe. The fit and finish on this guitar is phenomenal. I really like this guitar. It looks way more expensive than it is. It's got a really nice pine body. You can see the grain through the finish a little bit, through the butterscotch finish. It's got a vintage tinted neck. What I really like about this specific guitar is the pieces of pine are done really well. You really can't see the seams. Sometimes on these Classic Vibes you can see the seams and it looks absolutely horrible. This one's pretty good. I will say the fretwork on this, when I first got it, I had to take it to a big music store where I bought it from, and they had to do some fret leveling because I had some dead notes. There were two of this exact model in the store. The other one was much heavier, the frets were much worse, and it really didn't look nearly as nice. So I will say the quality control there might be something you want to look into. Once I got the frets leveled, which they did at no charge, it feels pretty good. No sharp edges. It plays really nicely. The fit and finish on this thing, I would say, is pretty good, especially for the price at around, I don't know, 400, 430 bucks, something like that. It is really, really nicely made. Up next, we have the Fender Vintera 50s modified. If you take a look at this one's a couple years old. They don't make it with the ash body anymore. This is an ash body, but look at the beautiful grain showing through on that. I just picked this one up used, and it's pretty much in like new condition. The fit and finish on this thing, again, is impeccable. It's much lighter than the Classic Vibe. The butterscotch finish looks incredible. I will say the fretwork, I mean, the notes all sound fantastic. The fretwork, it's a little sharp. I think I may take a file to this one. It doesn't feel great when you're running your fingers across the top. On the sides, it's okay. When I'm running them across the top, I honestly don't really notice it much while I'm playing, but it's just something that you want to think about before you buy one. I did play this in a store a couple days ago, a similar one. The new ones have an alder body. I think it was like a Daphne Blue or something that I was playing in the store the other day. That one's fretwork was actually a little bit better than this one. So I really like the ash body. I like the butterscotch, so I ended up picking this one up used for a pretty good price. This one retails around $1100 or $1200. So it's quite the price increase from the Classic Vibe to this. I would say pretty similar fit and finish. All in all, this definitely feels like a bit more of a quality instrument in your hands. But all in all, the fit and finish between this and the Classic Vibe, if you were blindfolded, you might not notice a major difference, to be honest. On to the American reissue. You'll notice that I actually had to refinish this guitar, which I have a completely separate video on. So if you're interested in that process, it's finished in true oil with a couple different stains. Take a look at my other video. Other than that, it's 100% stock. You may notice that the tone knob, that's stripped. I'm waiting on the new one to come in to match the other one. But other than that, it is completely stock. So other than the finish that I had to refinish because the previous owner tried to relic this guitar and did a really, really bad job. So I bought it cheap and I refinished it. So here's the American. reissue, similar weight to the Fender Vintera. The fit and finish on this thing is awesome. I can't really speak to the finish because I refinished it, but all in all, this sounds and feels like a really quality instrument. Like, let's talk about the fretwork on this one. The fretwork is impeccable. I mean, it feels awesome. They're rolled edges, and it really couldn't be any better. The fretwork on this is significantly better than the other two guitars on the American made really shines through there. So in terms of look, these three guitars look very similar in a lot of ways. In terms of feel, they are very, very different, okay? And here is where the Classic Vibe, in my opinion, loses out a little bit. For me, the neck is too thin. The neck is very thin. They call it the Modern C, but it feels much thinner to me than the Player Series or any other Telecasters that I've personally played. It is a thin neck. Now, if you like thin necks, awesome, okay? The other thing about this is the narrow, tall frets. They feel really narrow and they feel really tall. I don't love it. So you're trying to like slide around on the guitar a little bit. It just doesn't feel great to me. So not a huge fan of those. I will say it is the easiest of the three guitars to play, probably because of those narrow, tall frets. It is really easy to bar chords. It is really easy to fret chords on this guitar. It's really easy to bend and stop and all those things. One thing that people complain about on the Classic Vibe is the back has also got poly finish on it, or whatever finish they use, and people say it feels sticky. I actually like it. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think people kind of blow that out of proportion. I feel like you'd get used to it, but it is definitely shiny and tacky compared to the other two. All right, back to the Vintera and its neck. All right, so the neck on this guitar is awesome. It's got a soft V profile, which feels really, really good. It just, to me, it fits my hands. It is pretty fat. It's as fat as the U-shape, if not fatter than the U-shape on the American reissue. However, because of the V shape, it cuts down in the shoulder a little bit, so it's that chunky neck isn't getting in the way when you're trying to do your thing around the guitar. So I really, really like it. I think it's a perfect middle ground for me. I have like average size hands probably. I just like feeling like there's something in my hand, probably because I played mostly acoustic guitars until I just recently switched over to some electrics. So that's probably why I'm just used to a little bit of a fatter neck. And this is definitely, like, if you feel the actual width, it is bulky, but it doesn't feel bulky while you're playing. It just kind of fills your hand because it kind of slims down on the shoulders there. The back is a matte finish. I also do want to mention that this is essentially the same guitar as the Baja. It's pretty much the exact same in every way, except the Baja's got a glossy back of the neck, and other than that, it's the same thing. The new ones of these, though, do not come with an ash body. This is an ash body, just like the Baja. The other ones do not anymore because of the ash shortage. So this neck, super awesome. It feels sturdy. It feels bulky. It feels good. And the frets on this are medium jumbo, I think they're called, and they're awesome. They don't feel like they're in the way when you're sliding around the guitar. They're easier to fret than the vintage frets on the American reissue. It's kind of the best of both worlds, I think. So if I had to pick one neck, it'd probably be this one. Okay, once I get those frets filed down a little bit, I think this one's gonna be the neck that I like the most. On to the 52 reissue. There's just something about this guitar, probably because I spent so much time refinishing it, that I absolutely love. It's light, it feels good. The U shape feels really nice in my hands. The vintage frets don't bother me much unless I'm going to like a quick change with a bar chord, and then I gotta kind of sort my finger out to make sure I'm barring it properly. And I don't know if that's because of the vintage frets. I think it probably is, or because it has a 7.25 radius. So the other two guitars have a 9.5 radius, so they feel pretty similar when fretting. This one's a 7.25, which people say is supposed to be easier to bar your chords. I actually, not that I struggle with it, but I think it's just harder. I have to pay attention more. Whereas on the Classic Vibe, you just throw it on and it's good. And really same thing with the Vintera. But this one I have to kind of pay attention more, maybe because I'm not as used to it. But other than that, the feeling of this guitar in my hands is, this is my favorite guitar, okay? I love it. I spent a lot of time refinishing it, and it just feels good. The neck to me is awesome. I think they come with a little bit more of a glossy neck, but the guy that had this before me, I think he took Scotch-Brite pads and kind of rubbed it down a little bit. So it's not super glossy. It's kind of in between the two. The Classic Vibe is super glossy. The Vintera is not glossy at all. It's matte. This is closer to matte, but now that it's been Scotch-Brited. But this neck to me feels awesome. Some of the things that aren't as important to me as they might be to other people would be stuff like the hardware. Sure, on the Squier Classic Vibe, it feels a little bit cheaper. The tuners feel a little bit harder to turn. They're not quite as smooth as the other two guitars. If that's something that you are picky about, that might be something might be worth the upgrade. To me, this looks really nice. The only thing that it's got the steel saddles instead of the brass saddles, which I don't know if you really notice the difference. I'll do a quick sound test later. You might, but the other two have the brass saddles, so that would be considered an upgrade. The hardware on these two guitars, they're pretty close. The tuners to me feel very similar. The other hardware seems pretty similar. Now the hardware on this guitar has been relicked a little bit. This one's like pretty much brand new, but I don't notice a huge difference. The major difference is the neck and the frets. So if you're like, oh, I really want an American made 52 reissue, you just got to make sure you like the neck and the vintage frets. I think that to me is the biggest difference. All right, let's talk about weight. The Classic Vibe is 8.4 pounds. Like I mentioned before, the other one in the store was about 9.6 pounds. That thing felt like an anchor. This at 8.4 pounds is pretty good. This one was 8.2 pounds before I stripped all the finish off and did all the sanding. And now, believe it or not, it's down to 7.2. It dropped an entire pound, which I'm not sure. This is just on a bathroom scale, so take that for what it's worth. But it's down to 7.2 pounds, and it is awesome. The Vintera came in at 7.4 pounds, really light. I was surprised. I really thought this thing would be heavier. So let's say I were to strip the finish off of this like I did to, which I'm not gonna do, but let's say, because it doesn't need it, it's beautiful the way it is, but let's say I was gonna do that and I could drop it a whole pound, that would be really, really light. So the ash that they used to make this guitar must have been extremely light. So we'll do a very quick sound test on my Boss Katana. Here are my settings. I'm not going to use a pedal. Okay, so for the sound test, I'm going to keep my amp settings exactly the same. I'm not going to change anything. I'm not going to play through a pedal. On my individual guitars, I'll have the volume all the way up and the tone just about all the way up. I'll back off of it a little bit. Let's start with the bridge position on the Classic Vibe. Here we go. The Vintera, same exact test. Starting with the bridge position. American reissue. Go to the middle position, activate both pickups. Middle position. Both pickups. Neck position. Neck position. Neck pickup. One thing to note that the Vintera actually has a 4-way switch, making it different than the other two. I forgot to mention that earlier, but this activates both a little differently electronically, so you get some different sounds. There's also an S1 switch that kind of gives you a little bit of a funky sound. I'm not going to go into all of those right now.